Kimberly, I want to head back to you real quick because you were sharing things about what you witnessed and the access to healthcare and how foundational it was for Dallas to kind of get back on his feet, for him to work through and face what he needed to become well again. What would you say to other mothers who may be worried for their teen? I don't know if I should be getting them in help or not. I don't know if this is really something that needs intervention, or they'll just grow through this. They'll grow out of it. Because I think another thing you guys are both seeing is parents who aren't as willing, wanting to kind of dismiss it, sweep it under the rug, and that impact. So if you could speak to mothers or parents in general who may be watching this thinking, well, is this my teen? I don't know.
As parents, we don't always know when our kids are really feeling something, or if it's just something in the moment and it will pass and, but when Dallas first started struggling, we did get him into therapy. But I think that this is an excellent example of the fact that sometimes the first therapist you try is not the right therapist. And just because your child has a therapist does not mean they're getting the help they need. And so you need to evaluate the effectiveness of that particular care. So I would just say, stay tuned into your child. The teen years are tough. And this Generation Z especially, they've had a lot of challenges with social media, with COVID on top of that, and like the social breakdown that they had during those COVID years. It has really done a number on a lot of kids. And so when your child is telling you, hey, I think I need to talk to someone, or hey, I think something's going on because I'm really, I'm down, and they don't have to be down all the time. Dallas wasn't sad 24 hours a day. Sometimes he went to school and had a great time, had a great day. He was totally fine. But periodically, once every couple of weeks, he would fall into these deep depressions and he would have these crises moments. And we didn't know what to do. And so we got him into therapy. But in hindsight, that probably wasn't enough. And without having our own personal experience with mental health care or mental health situations, we didn't know that, okay, he needs an elevated level of care. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for parents to understand. So if you have a child who has raised their hand and said, I need some help, take it seriously, because this is your child. And it could have consequences that can be avoided and averted if you engage with your child and make sure that they get what they need. No different than if they had to go to the doctor and have vaccinations or go to the dentist for a cleaning. They need the mental health care, and they're counting on you because you are their number one advocate. And so if it's not going to be you, who's going to help them? Hopefully a teacher or guidance counselor or social worker at school, but ultimately the parent has the most influence and ability to help their children. And so
I make such a good point about the routineness of it. When I talk to a lot of parents about should I bring my child in? Do they need to be assessed? There's almost this hesitancy. And so I would agree with you is if the teen is asking that, let's just go ahead and just go to a counselor and determine that.
Dallas was in the 11th grade. He was a new student. He was going through a lot of anxiety and depression. And once a week, I was getting a call from school. I needed to come pick him up. There were some times he was really low and I was very worried about him. What would be your recommendation, Erica, on how to handle a situation like that, where as a mom, if my son is calling me and saying, I can't stay here, you got to come get me right now. To me, that's a crisis, because that means I have to leave work, go get my son because he's saying he can't. How would you advise parents in that situation? Or if your child is saying, I don't want to be here anymore, literally on this planet. How would you recommend that parents handle those?
So I'm going to take two lanes with that. One is if they're suicidal thinking, I don't want to be here anymore, thoughts of death or dying. And one, if it's that lack of functioning, I can't do this, I can't function anymore. Because I would say there's like two different places a child can be, and they can also overlap. So there's also that. But I'll start with suicidality because I feel like that is the most acute, the most serious. We've seen teens who are suicidal, who have followed through with things recently, in at least our local communities, and it's been tragic. Suicidal thinking is anything on the scale of, if I weren't here anymore, who would care, all the way to I want to die tomorrow and this is how. And it comes from a place of despair. It comes from a place of, I have been living in intense emotional pain and I need to get out. My escape idea of stopping this pain is just simply not be alive, because then that is my solution to not feeling this anymore. The pain centers of the body, the same ones that were if you were hit with a hammer, that part of the brain that would process that pain is the same part of the brain that processes emotional pain. And so that's why people may cut or self-harm, because the emotional pain is so enormous. Your body puts all its resources to that because that's more of like, uh-oh, something's happening. And so that part of the brain processes only the physical pain and gives you a break from the emotional pain. So that's why it's almost cathartic for people to self-harm, and why they say that is. And so that tells me, wow, you're living with a lot of emotional pain. And that also is not something to be minimized or just stop it. For someone to get to a suicidal place, you have to have an immense amount of emotional pain and hopelessness and feeling alone and like there isn't a real solution to make this go away. And so if someone's in that low despair place, they may not say anything about death or dying, but they may say, what's the point? Who cares? I don't want to anymore. It may sound like that, and that's the cue for you to start asking. But it's important to ask. They may feel nervous to bring it up. They may not know how to bring it up. A lot of times, especially with depression, they don't know how to talk about what they're feeling, because the part of the brain that connects to what I'm feeling to the verbal, communicative part of our brain is actually what's shut down when you're depressed. So them saying, I don't know how I feel, or I don't know why, that's not a lie. That's true. And that's just another part of the symptoms of how heavy of what they're going through. I like to ask, have you been thinking about not being here anymore? Have you been thinking about dying? Or has any thoughts been making you feel like taking your own life? I don't like to use the word suicide, because suicide can be a very triggering word. And I think suicide is also a very misunderstood word. Thoughts about suicide means thoughts about death. It doesn't always mean I'm going to die tomorrow and this is how. And so that misunderstanding may someone say, well, no, I don't. But then you may not get what they really are thinking or where they really are with it. And so asking more vague, open-ended questions helps you get more of where they are, what they're saying, what they're thinking inside their mind. And then the most important thing, if someone is that low, is they don't need to be alone. There's a great book, Why People Die by Suicide. It's a heavy book, but it's very informative. In that book, there's a lot of examples of those who jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. About 30% live. And so they're able to interview those. And they have about 5 seconds of falling before they hit the water. And so they have a little bit of time to think about what they just did. 95% said I regretted immediately and prayed I would live. One person said, as I walked up the bridge, if one person smiles at me, I won't do it. The power of connection and the fact that this isn't really what they want. It's just, I need to escape this pain. Being nurturing, being present is huge to help somebody who is in that spot. So now I'll speak to with the first part of your question, which is, I can't function. I can't be here. I would first say, respect that. Unless there's deception and deviousness and a personality disorder thing going on where they may be trying to play a game with you to get out of school. If they're truly like, you can see in their eyes, I am not okay. You can hear in their tone of their voice, something is wrong. I would say, okay, I'm coming to get you. Because being at school and pushing through isn't going to help anything. Be like, okay, you have the flu, stay at school and push through. It's going to go well. You don't rest, you don't get better. And so being able to slow down and kind of think through what is going on, hold space and room for being able to go to see a counselor so that you have someone to talk to. We can really figure out what's going on. A lot of parents and teens put a lot of pressure on school. Of like, well, if I can't miss anything and mental health is not an excuse to miss school. Yes, it is. What's more important? That they slow down, figure out what's wrong, comes up with solutions, have coping skills, and come back to school strong? Or we take a day off, we immediately jump back in, pretend everything's okay. I have a therapist appointment next week, but I've done so much in between. It's hard to remember what was going on that day, or I've learned how to shut it down, numb myself, almost what we call it dissociation, of just go into function without feeling mode. So now I don't even know how to describe what's wrong anymore. And so taking that pause and saying, we're going to make you well first, and then we're going to send you back to school is really, really important, because then they're going to come back and thrive and do really well and learn from this and grow as a person, versus this really isn't that important. Shut it down, turn it off, pretend it's not happening. I'm fine, which is what we're teaching our kids to do by just throwing them right back in it. If functioning isn't possible anymore, take that seriously and do what you need to do to get them the help, and then return them back when they're ready. I think that's another way we decrease stigma, is we stop pretending like I'm fine when we're not.